Tonight I want to talk to you about defeating debt. Defeating debt. In Romans chapter 13 and verse number 8, Paul writes, he says, owe nothing to anyone. Owe nothing to anyone. The New International Version reads, let no debt remain outstanding. Let no debt remain outstanding. So that puts it in a little bit different light, doesn't it? So, to be clear, to incur debt in and of itself is not a sin, all right? It's not a sin to have debt. But here's what I want you to know, and that is most debt is unwise. It might not be a sin to be in debt, but it's not wise most of the time. And much of the motivation behind debt reveals some problem areas in our lives. For instance, sometimes when we're in debt, sometimes debt reveals a lack of trust. We don't trust God to meet our needs, and so we use our credit cards. So debt sometimes reveals a lack of trust. Sometimes debt reveals a lack of patience. Lack of patience. We're impatient, and so we go into debt to get the things that we want before we can actually afford them. Sometimes debt reveals a spirit of competition. We can't actually keep up with family and friends financially, but we want to appear to, so we go into debt to keep up with everybody else. Sometimes debt reveals a spirit of greed. Our wanter is out of whack. No matter how much we have, it's never enough. Give me more is our motto, and so we go into debt. But to incur debt in and of itself is not a sin. In fact, as long as you're paying your bills, as long as you are current on your payments, you're meeting the requirements of your agreement. No debt remains outstanding, and because no debt remains outstanding, then you are not going against what Paul said about debt in Romans chapter 13 and verse 8. That being said, just because something is not a sin, that doesn't necessarily mean it's wise either. Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse number 23, just because something is okay to do doesn't necessarily mean we need to do it. Paul said just because something is okay to do doesn't necessarily mean that it is beneficial. Just because it's lawful, Paul said, doesn't necessarily mean it's beneficial. So just because we can doesn't necessarily mean that we should, right? Now, tonight's lesson is not meant to bring condemnation on anyone. That's not my objective. It may feel like it before the night is over, but it's not my objective. That's not what I'm trying to accomplish. What I want to accomplish, I want to convince you to keep debt to a bare minimum. Say bare minimum. And I want to challenge you to make as your goal debt-free living. Well, Pastor, that's unrealistic. Well, no, it's not. Challenging? Yes. Difficult? Absolutely. But the pluses blow the minuses out of the water. And it can be done. And many people are doing it. Most people are not, but many are. I mean, for instance, it would be nearly impossible to own a home without taking out a mortgage, right? I'd be naive, I'd be silly to stand up here and talk to you about debt-free, including your house. I'm not necessarily talking about your house being debt-free, but I am talking about your house being debt-free. You can't buy it cash debt-free unless, Uncle George dies and leaves you the money. It'd be nearly impossible to own a home without taking out a mortgage. I understand that, but even your house can be paid off years before the standard mortgage time if you're not in debt in other areas and can pay more than the minimum payment. And while we're talking about houses, I strongly advise getting a 15-year mortgage if at all possible. Not a 30-year mortgage, a 15-year mortgage if at all possible. You would be amazed at how little it affects your payment from 30 years to 15. You would think, oh, it's double, right? I mean, you know, if I'm going to pay it off in 15 or 30. 15 would be half of 30, right? You would think that, but it ain't even close. I mean, it ain't even in the ballpark. It's amazing the difference. You need to run the numbers and just see. And if you already have a 30-year mortgage, I'm not telling you to go get a 15-year mortgage. I'm going to tell you to turn your 30-year mortgage into a 15-year mortgage by just paying more on the principal. Run the numbers and find out what would my payment be at 15 years and just pay that payment and it'll do the same thing, all right? And you don't have to go pay money to get a refinance, okay? And what you need to understand that in a 30-year mortgage, it's mostly, it is, I don't want to put a percentage on it, but it is almost all interest for the first several years. Not even touching the principal. Paid on it for 10 years and I barely owe less than what I did when I started. You'll find that to be true. That's why you need to have a 15-year mortgage or pay more every month on the principal. All right? You tracking with me? Let me make 3 quick statements and then we'll talk about defeating debt. Statement number 1, 70% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. They could not survive 2 weeks without a paycheck. Yeah, they could with a credit card. That's why they're in trouble. Second statement I want to make, the Bureau of Labor and Statistics tell us more people are filing for bankruptcy each year than are graduating from college. Sad, huh? Third statement I want to make is USA Today reports that 55% of Americans always or sometimes worry about money. The number 1 cause of divorce is financial issues in the marriage. Debt is the major cause of most people's financial struggles. How many think we need to get our finances under control? Hear me tonight, debt is not your friend. For most people, debt is your enemy. All right, let's go to our notes. I got your note. Everybody got notes? Let's go to our notes. Let's talk about debt. I'm going to give you 3 things about debt tonight. Number 1, debt is a choice. We touched on this last Wednesday night, but I'm going to go ahead and give it to you because that's how we learn. Debt is a choice. In America, we love to play the blame game, don't we? Americans seldom take the blame for their actions. It's always somebody else's fault. It's amazing to me that when the Democrats are in office and things go bad, they blame the Republicans before them, and they're just, reaping the benefits of the bad Republicans. When the Republicans are in office and things go bad, they just blame the Democrat that had it before them, and they're just reaping the benefits, right? Come on. I don't care which side of the fence you're on. I'm telling you, we just love to play the blame game. Americans love to play the blame game. Seldom take responsibility for their actions. Always somebody else's fault. Again, not trying to heap condemnation on you. I'm not trying to make you feel bad. But the truth remains, no matter what your problem is, no matter what your problem, whether it's finances or something else, no matter what your problem is, you will not be able to fix the problem unless you admit that you have a problem. First thing you got to do is admit you have a problem. Take ownership of your problem. And you won't be able to fix the problem unless you're willing to own your problem and take responsibility for your actions which brought on the problem. So if you have debt today, your debt came about through an act of your own will. If you're in debt today, you can't blame anyone besides yourself. You chose to go into debt. Now, when I say this, immediately people start making excuses and start rationalizing the decision that they made to go into debt. You just don't understand, Pastor. If you just knew my circumstance, if you just knew my situation, you just don't understand. I didn't have a choice. Sorry. You did. You did. You could have said no. In your notes, we will never get our financial house in order until we learn how to say no to debt. Try that word with me. Most Americans can't even enunciate the word. It's just two little, what are they? Letters. I couldn't even think of that. They're just two little letters, but we can't. See if you can say it. Can you even get it out of your mouth? Can you say it? Oh, you can say it. You can say it. No. Hey, say it with some conviction. No. You could have said no. You could have bought something cheaper. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. You could have left off some of the bells and whistles that you didn't really need. Now hear me, if you can afford the bells and whistles, and by afford, I mean pay cash for them, that's okay. But if they drive you deeper into debt, it's not okay. You chose to be in debt. You could have taken on another job and saved the money and paid cash for it. You could have waited. Here's a novel idea. You could have done without it. It's amazing what we could do without. Yeah. So in your notes, here's what I want you to just adapt. Tell yourself that there is nothing that you want more than the freedom that comes with being debt-free. Do I want this? Yeah, I want this. Do I want it enough to be in debt for it? Well, no. Get to the point where you don't want anything bad enough to go into debt for it. And I'm not talking about your house now. We already settled that issue. But I don't want it bad enough to go into, I don't want it bad. There's nothing I want more than the freedom that I have in being debt-free. If you could ever get debt-free and have the freedom that you have in debt-free living, you would understand what I'm talking about. I want it, but I don't want it bad enough to be in debt for it. I want it, and I'm going to get it, but I'm not going to get it until I can pay for it. Are you still with me? Three things about debt. Number one, debt is a choice. Number two, debt is a charmer. Debt is a charmer. Debt knows how to charm you. Nothing down, easy monthly payments, no payments for a full year. I had a young man, he doesn't attend this church anymore, and I wouldn't tell you who he was anyway if I told you, but he was bragging to me one day about some furniture that he bought. He says, I don't have a payment for 3 years. 3 years? In 3 years, the dog's going to pee on it. Uncle George, who weighs 400 pounds, is going to sit on it and break it. You're not even going to start paying on it for 3 years and you're bragging about it? Debt's a charmer, man. Nothing down, easy monthly payments. Buy now, pay later. Oh, you'll pay later, all right. Debt's a charmer. Debt says, everyone has this or everyone has that. Don't you deserve to have what everyone else has? Well, let me tell you what everyone else has. Everyone else has debt. Romans 12:2 says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Debt is a charmer. It paints a pretty picture. It promises utopia. My wife and I are totally debt-free. I tell you that not to brag on us, but to tell you that I'm not teaching theory. I'm not teaching theory. I'm not teaching one thing and living another thing. I live what I teach, okay? So my wife and I are totally debt-free, including our house. A few years ago, several years ago now, I started seeing some signs around that said new home auctions. And there's going to be an auction of over 100 brand new houses, the sign said. An auction, going to auction. You know, you're thinking bargain, you know, brand new homes. I mean, this was 12, 15 years ago. So, you know, not the economy not what we're in now, okay? And so my wife and I, we started looking at these brand new houses they were going to auction off. And we thought, you know, if we could pick up a couple of these houses at a bargain price, rent them out, let the rent let the renters pay for our houses, you know, and we could use the rental income off of those for retirement in 15 years, you know, 15-year note, get them paid for, let the rent pay for them. 15 years when we retired, we'd have these houses paid for and rental income, and I'm pretty sure you guys are not going to keep paying me a salary when I'm gone. For some reason, I think you're going to be kind of narrow-minded about that. So I've been looking for a lot of years to the day when I'm not collecting a salary from a church, all right? And I've had several rental properties in the past. Bought my first rent property when I was in my early 20s. So I've bought rental property for years. But here's my point. We began by looking at these for an investment for retirement. Before the day was over, we found ourselves out at Joe Pool Lake looking at semi-mansions. We started out looking at rental, houses for rental property, ended up the same day out at Joe Pool Lake looking at some really beautiful homes that we did not need to buy. Debt's a charmer. It can charm you. It's a smooth talker. And debt, in your notes, debt will always find a way of justifying itself. 3 things about debt. Number 1, debt is a choice. Number 2, debt is a charmer. The third thing I want to say about debt is a chain. Proverbs 22:7 says the borrower is servant to the lender. According to Proverbs, according to Solomon, debt makes you a slave. It tells you what you can and cannot do. It tells you what time you have to get up in the morning. It tells you what time you have to go to bed at night. It tells you where you can go. It tells you where you cannot go, where you can live, where you cannot live, what you can drive, what you cannot drive. Debt is like dragging around a ball and chain. Because of it, you can't seem to make any progress. Let me give you 7 hindrances to debt. 7 hindrances to debt. Number one, relationships are hindered. Remember that best friend that you used to have before you borrowed money from them? Or they borrowed money from you? Remember how fun it used to be to go home for the family reunion and have that Thanksgiving dinner until somebody borrowed money from somebody and didn't pay it back? 7 hindrances to debt. Number one, relationships are hindered. Number 2, resources are hindered. You make plenty of money, but it's spent before you even get your paycheck. Because you got this debt and you got that debt and you got to pay this money and you got to pay that one, you got to pay that one, you know. Resources are hindered. Number 3, reaping is hindered. Because you are using God's money to pay unwise bills with, you don't live under God's blessing. Because you're not tithing, you're not giving, you got all your money allocated, and so you're not reaping. You still with me? Number 4, recreation is hindered. You are drastically in need of a vacation. You're drained, you are exhausted, but you are so strapped financially by debt that you have to keep your nose to the grindstone. I've used this illustration before, but it goes right here, so I'm going to use it again. You know, the young wife asked her husband, said, "Where are we going on vacation this year?" He said, "Vacation? What are you talking about, vacation? I'll tell you what we're going to do for vacation. We're going to stand in our new house and open the shades and look out to the driveway to our new car. And then we're going to go sit in our new car and we're going to look at our new house. That's our vacation. We don't have no, we got our house payment's too high, our car payment's too, there ain't no, that's our vacation." Recreation is hindered. Number 5, relaxation is hindered. Oh, you would love to go home and let Calgon take you away. Do you even know what I'm saying? Is that so old that nobody knows? Is it still around? Yeah, you would love to go home and let Calgon take you away. You'd love to go home and put your feet up after work and enjoy your evening, but because of debt, you've got to leave your main job and you've got to rush to your second job. Because you're in such debt, it takes both jobs just to pay those payments. Are we having fun yet? The 6th, reputation is hindered. What kind of witness for Christ are you if you have the reputation of someone who doesn't pay their bills? Your outgo exceeds your income. The 7th hindrance, retirement is hindered. What retirement? What retirement? People in debt can't retire. Please hear me today. Please. I don't mean to be unkind. I don't mean to be unkind. I'm trying to give somebody a wake-up call. I am being kind. It's called tough love. Tough love. All right, we've been talking about debt. 3 things about debt. Number 1, debt is a choice. Number 2, debt is a charmer. Number 3, debt is a chain. Now let me give you 6 key words that will help you get out of debt. How many of you want to get out of debt? Let me give you 6 key words to help you get out of debt. Number 1, dream. Ask yourself today, what could my life be like if I wasn't hindered by debt? If I wasn't dragging around the ball and chain of debt, where could I go? What could I do? Who could I help? How much could I give? Just in the lobby a few moments ago, a man who was in debt many years ago when he first started coming to this church. He said, I've gone through your financial thing 3 times. He said, I'm finally doing it. And he told me about buying a new car. And he said, we didn't trade our old one in. He said, I said to my wife, you know what? We know somebody that would be blessed to have this car, and we can buy this car outright without trading in the other one, so let's give this car to that person. I said, didn't that feel good? Wasn't that fun? Wasn't that fun? I mean, 15 years ago, they were strapped. 15 years ago, there were some marriage issues because there were some finances. Today, no more. Isn't that awesome? Somebody actually listened after the 3rd time and did it, all right? Dream. What would it feel like to be able to hand the keys to a single mom that, say, hey, I mean, even if it's a beater, man, dream, what would that feel like? Awesome, I'll tell you it does because I've done it. The Bible says Joseph dreamed a dream. It was the picture that he had in his mind of one day becoming a ruler that kept him going in the darkest days of his life. So allow yourself to dream. Think about what your life could be like. All the places you've always wanted to go, but debt prohibited you. The many ministries that you wanted to support. When the missionary came and it tugged on your heart and you wanted to invest in that ministry, but you couldn't. Think how wonderful it'd be if you could. The struggle that you could alleviate for others. Dream. See yourself debt-free. Notice the second word, decide. Draw the line in the sand. Say to yourself, enough is enough. Have your Popeye moment. I've had alls, I can stand, I can't stand so no more. Proverbs 6 talks about debt and talks about co-signing debt. Proverbs 6 verses 4 and 5. Give no sleep to your eyes, no slumber to your eyelids. Deliver yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter and like a bird from the hand of the fowler. I hope somebody today will leave here with their mind made up. I'm not going to live like a slave any longer. My mind is made up. I've made a decision. I'm going to take appropriate steps to get out of debt. I'm not going to drag around that ball and chain of debt any longer. 6 keys to getting out of debt. Number 1, dream. Number 2, decide. Number 3, declare. Tell someone. Tell someone. Make yourself accountable by declaring what you are going to do. And then give them permission to ask you how you are doing. The great inventor Thomas Edison, he would hold a press conference and announce an invention before he invented it. Think about that. He said, in so doing, I now have to, because I've declared it. I've said, this is what I'm going to do. Before David stood before the giant Goliath, he first made the declaration. You come to me with your spear and your shield and your sword, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the name of the God of the armies of Israel, and today, buddy, I'm going to have your head. Six keys to getting out of debt. Number 1, dream. Number 2, decide. Number 3, declare. Number 4, demolish. Give yourself a plastectomy. Cut up your credit cards. Notice what David did to Goliath. He not only knocked him down with the slingshot and the stones, but once he had him down, he cut his head off. See, David wanted to make sure Goliath was really dead. He might just be unconscious. So I want to make sure he's dead, and so I'm going to cut that sucker's head off. Besides that, I declared it. I said that's what I was going to do. David wanted to make sure Goliath wasn't just merely knocked out. He knew if Goliath was merely unconscious, if Goliath regained consciousness, he would have had a terrible headache and he would have been one mad giant. People say, well, I can control my spending. Well, the greatest indicator of what a person will do is what they... I don't need the plastectomy, Pastor. I don't need to cut my credit cards up. I can control my spending. I have control. Krista knows about control. Her brother was in karate, her older brother. And so he would practice his karate on Krista. And you know how those karate guys, And I don't know if it was Krista or us or whatever said, be careful. I have control. He knew how, one day he lost control, right? One day he lost control. And there was bloody evidence of it, okay? So I can control my spending. I won't cut up my credit cards. I'll use them just for convenience, and I'll pay them off every month. And they do pretty good for a month or two. But because they didn't cut that giant's head off, eventually he regained consciousness, and now he's a meaner, bigger giant than he was before. Fourth word, demolish. Demolish your old ways of thinking. The old way of thinking was in line with that credit card commercial that says, I want it all, and I want it now. The new way of thinking says, I'm tired of being in debt. I'm tired. I'm going to get out of debt, and I'm going to stay out of debt. My new philosophy is, if I can't pay cash for it, I won't buy it. It doesn't mean I can't have it. It means I can't have it now. It just means I'm postponing the purchase until I can actually afford it. And when I say afford it, that means I can pay cash for it. Nobody's walked out yet. 6 key words to getting out of debt. Number 1, dream. Number 2, decide. Number 3, declare. Number 4, demolish. And number 5, develop. Once you have dreamed, decided, declared, and demolished, it's now time to develop. Develop a strategy. Develop a plan of action. How am I going to get from point A to point Z? How am I going to get from where I am to where I want to be? See, I'm thinking of a pastor in another city that I know very well, that I've known for over 30 years, and he's really, really good at dreaming. And he's really good at deciding, and he's really good at declaring, and he's really good at demolishing, but he never seems to get around to developing. Somebody said too much analysis produces paralysis. That's in your notes, I think. See, there comes a time when it's time to stop talking about it and start doing it. As Nike says, just do it. How many know who Barney Fife is? Please don't. Is there anybody that don't know who Barney Fife is? Roger, do you know who Barney Fife is? Oh, bless your heart, you have not lived. Barney, you know who Andy Griffith is? You ever heard of the Andy Griffith Show? Barney Fife is the inept deputy, right? That works for Andy. In Andy Griffith in Mayberry, North Carolina. Yeah, okay. Are we tracking together? Okay, Barney's my favorite whatever of all time. I mean, it don't get better than Barney. Barney's the best, pull it in his pocket, because he's a deputy, but sheriff won't let him carry it in his gun because he's always shooting it off somewhere. He had carried. The inept deputy, Barney Fife, who thought he was all that, but he was not all that. So one day there's a stranger in town, and for whatever reason he ends up on Andy, the sheriff, ends up on Andy's front porch with Barney. So here's Barney and here's Andy, and here's this complete stranger that doesn't know Barney or Andy, but it's Mayberry, and everybody, they just accept everybody, so they're sitting on the porch. And so Barney goes, tells Andy, said, going to go down to Wally's filling station. Have me a bottle of pop. Talk to Goober. Mosey on over to Thelma Lou's. Have a nice dinner. Sit on the front porch. Have a cup of coffee. Go home. Go to bed. Yep, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to Wally's, have a bottle of pop, talk to Goober, going over to Thelma Lou's, have a nice dinner, sit out on the front porch, have a cup of coffee, go home, go to bed. That's what I'm going to do. Going to Wally's, bottle of pop, talk to Goober, Thelma Lou's, dinner, front porch, coffee, home, bed. And the stranger couldn't stand it anymore, and he said, go to Wally's, drink a bottle of pop, talk to Goober, go to Thelma Lou's, have a nice meal, sit on the front porch, have a cup of coffee, go home, go to bed, but just do it. Somebody need to hear that tonight. You've been talking about going to Wally's and the pop and the front porch and the dinner long enough. It's time to do it, right? Yeah. See, getting out of debt isn't rocket science. All you have to do to be successful financially is live on less than you make and invest what's left over. Now, of course, there won't be anything left over unless you give every dollar a name on purpose, on paper. It's called a budget, and then stick to that written budget. We understand. I'm just going to touch this and go on, but pay God first. A minimum of 10% of your income belongs to God. Pay God first. Pay yourself second in savings and investments, and then pay everyone next. Notice I said pay everyone else next, not charge everything else. All right, let me help you develop a very simple plan of action. Number one, ask God to help you. How many think that's a good idea? Yes. How many think you ought to get God on board? Yes. Number one, ask God to help you. Tell God that you are sorry that you have made a mess. And you're sorry. And you need Him to help you clean up your financial mess. How many know God will help you? The second thing you need to do is abandon your luxuries. Now, there's nothing wrong with luxuries if you can afford them. And what does it mean when I say afford? Pay cash for it. See, some of you need to sell your car. Some of you need to sell your boat. Some of you need to sell your house because you can't afford it. Some of you are not driving your car is driving you. Abandon your luxuries. It's not forever. Say it's not forever. It's not forever. Hey, if you don't change something, the way you're living will be forever. But what I'm talking about is not forever. It's just long enough to get your finances in order. It's just long enough to get out of debt. And then once you get out of debt, bring them back one at a time when you can pay cash for them. Well, I see Pastor has this, or I see Pastor does that. Well, I'm not in debt. Nanny, nanny, boo-boo. I'm really teasing. Please understand that, okay? But come on. Number 3, apply for a second job. Part-time. Now, make sure you still have time for God and your family. Okay? Balance is a good thing. Apply for a second job. Make sure you still have time for God and your family. You know, I'm talking about, you know, part-time at Walmart. I'm talking about part-time at 7-Eleven. I'm talking about delivering pizzas. I'm talking about mowing yards. I'm talking about, okay, apply for a second job. If you're in debt, trying to get out of debt, but make sure you still have time for God and your family, or you'll create a bigger problem than you had to begin with, all right? It's not forever, just until you get out of debt. And apply all of your money. I mean, yeah, when you get that second job, you want to take that money and go spend it, right? No, apply all of your money on the second job to debt. Number 4, attack your debt. Apply all the extra money to your lowest debt. And when you get that debt paid off, attack the next lowest debt, and then the next and the next. It's called the debt snowball. We've already talked about that in these lessons. And do that until all the debts are paid. Number 5, abstain from all future debt. You might say, well, if I do this, I'll never have anything. Well, no, you will have plenty if you do this. Because you really don't, if you're in debt, you really don't have anything right now. You just have a debt. You don't have anything, it has you. If you think you have a lot now, just stop making your payments and see how much you have. You think you have a lot? Just stop making your payments and see how much you have. I'm sure that if you stop making your car payment, that whoever you have your car loan with will be just fine with it, right? Because it's your car, right? They come out to repossess it and you say, what are you doing? That's my car. No, it's not your car. It's their car. You're just renting it. And you don't pay the rent and you're going to get thrown out. Hello? Right? That's my house. Oh, really? Really? That's your house? You have whatever, $10, $15, $20, $30, $40,000 equity in it. You owe $300,000, $400,000 for it. It's yours, really? Really? You really think it's yours? Stop making the payments and you'll find out whose it is. I'm trying to help. Still love me? All right. 6 keys to getting out of debt. Dream, decide, declare, demolish, develop. Number 6, determine. You will always be in debt unless you determine to get out and stay out. And everywhere you turn, you're going to be tempted with debt. Society says it's okay. It's just the American way. Family encourages it. Oh, you deserve it. Oh, thank you. I deserve this bondage. Friends encourage you. Go for it. You should. Should I? Oh, yeah, you should. I thought you were my friend. You deserve the bigger house, the better car. Oh, they say. Listen, I'm not preaching against nice things. I'm preaching against debt. I want you to have nice things. I don't want nice things to have you. I don't want you to just have a house. I want you to have a home. And a house is just a house if you're never in it. A house is not a home if it's just filled with bickering and fussing and fighting over finances. I told you last week or a week before, I'd rather have a smaller home than a bigger house. I want you to have nice things. I just want you to wait until you can actually afford them. And afford means... But every time you turn on the TV, every time you pick up a magazine, every time you listen to the radio or pass by a billboard, constantly, day in and day out, continually, we are being bombarded with the message, oh, what we have is not enough. To be cool, we need this. To be like everyone else, we need that. But everyone else is broke. Everyone else is in debt up to their eyeballs. Why do you want to be like everyone else? You must determine in your mind to get debt-free and stay debt-free. To get out of debt and to stay out of debt will require determination. It's okay to have nice things. It's not okay for nice things to have you.